It is Tuesday, May 19th, 2015. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, Shia militias prepare to enter the Iraqi city of Ramadi and take it over after it fell to ISIS forces over the weekend. The European Union launches a first-of-its-kind naval mission to stop human trafficking to its shores. And later on the show, with the world marking Anti-Homophobia and Transphobia Day, we host Iska Smith, a former Orthodox rabbi who now identifies as a woman. Good morning, I'm Yael Avi, and we begin in Iraq, where Shia militias are preparing to enter the provincial capital of Ramadi and take it from the hands of forces belonging to the Islamic State, who conquered it from the Iraqi army over the weekend. The retreat in Anbar province was a huge setback for the military and a blow to the United States-led coalition. In what's perhaps the sign of growing dependence on Tehran, which is not a member state of the anti-ISIS coalition, Iraq's defense minister met yesterday with his Iranian counterpart to discuss strategy. Earlier, he met with the head of the United States Central Command and requested additional assistance. But with the member states unwilling to put boots on the ground, all he could seek was more airstrikes, which have proven to be of limited effectiveness in Iraq against ISIS, to say the least. Joining me in studio is I-24 News senior Middle East analyst Ali Waqid. Ali,
good morning.
Good morning to you. Let's take a look at the following report from Iraq and break it down from there.
It's a dynamic that has come to typify the war against the Islamic State terrorist group. After months on the defensive, with various gains made by the international coalition battling the jihadists, IS achieved a sudden major success with the capture of the city of Ramadi in Anbar province Sunday, only 112 kilometers west of Baghdad. The fighting in the Sunni-dominated city has been going on for months, but an intensification in recent days, including a string of suicide bombings, saw the Iraqi army run from the city, despite statements claiming it would not be allowed to fall. At least 500 people are thought to have been killed in the latest round of fighting, with between 6,000 and 8,000 fleeing for their lives. Hundreds are now stranded in the desert, having been denied refuge in other cities.
Chaos, violence, and terror spreads on streets. Shells and bombs landed randomly on houses. There are new reports that many families have been killed. Women were seen running in the streets.
General Lloyd Austin, chief of U.S. Central Command, was in Baghdad Monday for a meeting with the Iraqi defense minister, who is eager for more coalition airstrikes. American officials attempted to convey optimism.
It is possible to have the kind of attack we've seen in Ramadi, but I am absolutely confident in the days ahead that will be reversed.
But in terms of boots on the ground, the Iraqi government is now left with little choice but to turn once again to Iranian-backed Shiite militias to retake Ramadi. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi was hoping to avoid using the Shiites in Ramadi for fear of a sectarian backlash from the region's Sunnis, but it appears he is out of options. Reports on Monday noted a Shiite paramilitary force had already reached an army base in the vicinity of Ramadi. The Iranian defense minister was also present in Baghdad Monday. IS often attempts to portray itself as the defender of the region's Sunni Muslims in the face of perceived Shiite aggression. The situation in Anbar province could likely change once again in the near future, but there is no guarantee it will be for the better.
Joining us first from Iraq, Erbil in northern Iraq, is freelance journalist Mohammed Salam. Mohammed, good morning to you.
Good morning to you too.
Now, all these reports that Shia militias are about to take over, or will attempt to take over Ramadi, is there a feeling or a sense in Iraq that that is the only thing that can basically bring the Anbar province back into the hands of the Iraqi administration?
Well, certainly if I understood your question correctly, there is a very strong realization in the country that retaking Anbar will not be possible through the Iraqi army, and so the Shia paramilitaries are seen as the only hope at the moment at the fighting force who can really fight ISIS in Ramadi and possibly retake it.
Now, when it comes to Shia militias in Ramadi, in the event that that happens, sectarian violence between factions in Iraq is not something that's going away. There's an understanding, I'm assuming, that nothing can be done in the Anbar province without boots on the ground. But what do the people of northern Iraq or the people of Iraq feel about that?
certainly the concerns about sectarian violence or retaliations are valid. We have seen that in other parts of the country, in Diyala and also in Tikrit, when the Shia paramilitaries fought and pushed ISIS out in those areas. So we might also see some degree of that kind of violence at the end in Ramadi, but the fact of the matter, as I said before, is that retaking Ramadi without the Shia paramilitaries is going to be impossible. The Iraqi army is not the kind of force that can be relied on for the moment, and the local tribal forces also do not have the capabilities to confront ISIS on their own. So it's kind of a bittersweet pill that the local Sunnis have to swallow if they want their city out of ISIS hands, and by that I mean they have to accept that the Shia paramilitaries have to take part in that operation.
Mohammed, why is the Iraqi army failing so miserably in battling ISIS?
Well, the army has had issues for quite some time, and we first saw that in the Battle of Mosul last year, and so they really have not had time to reorganize and rebuild army over the past year. So the fact that they have not been able to perform up to a desirable level in Ramadi is not really surprising, and it might take years for this army to be rebuilt and for it to be able to stand on its feet.
Mohammed, I want to thank you joining us from and hope that you can stay with us. Joining us from Washington, D.C. now also via Skype is Foundation for Defense of Democracy senior counselor and former Vice President Cheney's National Security Advisor, John Hanna. Good morning to you again, Mr. Hanna.
Good morning, Azrael.
Love having you on the show yet again. Mr. Hanna, judging from the situation in Iraq, the fall of Ramadi and retreat of the crumbling Iraqi army, it feels, to people sitting in the Middle East that Iran is actually needed to back off what seems to be this unstoppable, formidable force, as it's being called in all the press, ISIS, that nobody can do it in Iraq without Iran. Would you think that is the case?
Well, what I'd say is that it's simply the case that we have to remember that so much of the problem in Iraq in the first place, the complete disillusionment and desperation of the Sunni community, their decision to welcome the ISIS forces into Iraq in the first place, are largely the result of Iranian interference and manipulation in Iraq and its support for the highly sectarian policies of Nouri al-Maliki. So I think understanding that context, to now believe that Iran is somehow going to be the agent of a solution to our problem, our long-term problem in Iraq, which is the need for real political reconciliation and giving the Sunnis a real reason to have a stake in a stable sovereign government in Baghdad. I think it's just a flight of fantasy to believe that we ought to open the gates now to Iran running into the Sunni-dominated areas of Iraq to liberate them and set things right. I think that will only worsen our problem going forward.
Right, but putting aside, what led to what, the fact of the matter is every military analyst in the region, everybody, looking at the situation says that ISIS cannot be beaten in Iraq without boots on the ground. And it is clear that the Iraqi army is not up to the task. And the United States, being the only force that maybe can do that on the ground, is unwilling to get into Iraq. Then who else is in the game?
What I'd say the United States has been what we've witnessed now is the United States has been unwilling to implement a proper train and equip program to get the Iraqi army back on its feet as quickly as possible and to mobilize, create a force in Sunni areas that is also capable and willing to fight, to go toe-to-toe with ISIS and begin evicting it from the Sunni areas of Iraq. The solution does not lie in Iran. and the highly sectarian policies of a Shiite-backed government in Baghdad, it lies in the Sunni community itself and in the Iraqi army, that institution of the Iraqi state that the United States has to, and the rest of the international community, have to actually put in place serious programs and commit serious resources, including more American troops on the ground to train and equip these forces.
But there you go. I mean, those who will argue that there have been 12 years thus far since 2003 to equip and train the Iraqi military, and clearly that has not worked. And I think, you know, people will say that not the region, but Iraq itself is out of time.
Well, all I can tell you is, yes, the situation is very, very bad now. It has not been a continuous downward trajectory. There was a point in time when a formula had been achieved with the Iraqi military, with the Sawa, the Sunni awakening in Iraq, in which those forces of al-Qaeda were actually defeated in Iraq. Where we've been set back tremendously by what's happened over the last several years. But again, the answer is not a desperate outreach to Iran to solve our problem in Iraq. It will only worsen it over time and make our long-term problem worse. It is to commit to a long-term, serious program that includes real resources to get back on track in mobilizing the Iraqi army and Sunni forces in the local areas in Anbar province and in Mosul to actually take the lead in evicting ISIS from their midst and giving them an incentive, a real incentive that they have a place in this government in Baghdad, which they still don't believe. Even if they like Mr. Abadi, the new prime minister, they believe he is too weak to deliver anything because he's surrounded by Shiite militias and other political figures like the former Prime Minister Maliki, who are completely backed by Iran.
Ali Waqid with me here, a senior Middle East analyst for I-24 News, with a question for you.
Mr. Hanna, actually these are two questions. First, we've been for a long time talking about the American strategy to fight the Islamic State, and my question is whether this strategy was reduced to kick out the Islamic State from Tikrit in order to find them a couple of weeks after and to chase them in Ramadi. And the second question, it seems that some Sunnite allies of the United States, mainly the Arab Gulf countries, are not interested at this moment, at least, to see the Islamic State as a serious and significant opponent to the Shiite regimes in Iraq and to the Alawite Bashar al-Assad in Syria. And there is a kind of understanding that we should weaken the Islamic State, but not eradicate them totally.
I'm not sure I got your first question. I'm sorry. As to the second question, I agree with you that my sense is that the Sunni Arab states at this point in time do have other priorities. First and foremost, obviously, in Yemen, but also in Syria, where they've also dramatically escalated their support for the Sunni rebels and have made significant advances recently in further weakening the Assad regime. I think there's been a division in labor in which they assume that America, because of what's happened since 2003, has both the greatest stake in stabilizing Iraq and evicting Islamic State from Iraq, and the greatest responsibility, given our role there over the course of the last decade or so. So I think it's really more a division of labor and Sunni Arab priorities than to believe that they somehow don't care about the fact that the Iranian Quds Force and Iranian-backed militias have essentially invaded and taken over Iraq and are quickly supplanting the legitimate institutions of the Iraqi state and beginning a process that looks very much like the Hezbollahization of Iraq.
Now, valid points. Mr. Hanna, finally, over the course of the last week, there have been many, many reports coming out of be it Iraq or Syria, but all these operations, be it an American raid, killing another, high chief of ISIS, another one in Iraq last week, supposedly. But these don't seem to put a dent within the organization. Would you say there's a misunderstanding in Western modus operandi against groups as such in the Middle East, that if you kill its head, it doesn't really put a dent in the organization itself, and rather on the ground we're seeing more advances? So is the strategy all wrong to begin with?
Well, the strategy is clearly wrong. I'm not sure that the line of operation that says you go out, you hunt down, you capture, or kill, or decapitate the senior leadership of these terrorist organizations, and you conduct these kinds of raids to unravel their networks, both financially and politically, as well as militarily, that seems to me an entirely legitimate and necessary line of operation. The problem is it can't be your only line of operation. It's got to be part of a very comprehensive strategy that includes a much larger political, economic, military, and information operations approach to defeating the enemy. It can't only be snatch and grab operations or drone strikes against terrorist leaders.
In other words, it can't just be a Hollywood movie. Mr. Hanna, I can't thank you enough for being with us this morning. Ali, finally, thank you. Finally for you, you know, the same question. People in the United States, regardless of their ideology, can argue that, you know, boots on the ground are needed, but it's not going to be the United States, and warn against Iran. But isn't Iran the only player nearby that is willing to put boots on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not by generosity that the Iranians are offering to put their boots on the ground, but by conserving and reserving their interests both in Iraq and in Syria. And maybe I do agree with Mr. Hanna that the Iranians were at the source of the problem, the sectarian problem in Iraq.
Yeah, but the data now is that at the source of in regards of the 2003 invasion.
Absolutely, and this is why Iran seems now, maybe it was part of the problem at the very beginning, but now Iran is absolutely part of the solution. And without the Iranian role and the backed militias of Iran in Ramadi and elsewhere, the Iraqi army cannot face the Islamic State, and Iran should be there in order to help a government, an official government, to try to gain its sovereignty over its soil. Now the question is, Yael, since 2003, for 10 years, the Americans were building the so-called Iraqi army, and we see this army collapsing over and over, and without the paramilitary, as they've been called in Iraq, or the militias as we call them, the Iraqi army is not capable to take control over a small city. It's a provincial city, it's an important city, but still it is a city where a couple of hundreds of fighters of the Islamic State are there, and turning the life of a whole region to a nightmare. And all the international community, 16 countries that are participating, are not capable to chase them from a small square of kilometers. And this is a question not only about the tactic level, but about the strategic level. I'm more and more convinced that the Arab countries, for the moment, don't want to see the Islamic State disappearing. They want to see maybe the Islamic State weaken. Absolutely, yeah. Both in Iraq and in Syria.
In Syria. Ali Waqid, thank you very much for being with us this morning as we move along. In Europe, moving to Europe, in Brussels, the European Union announced the launch of an unprecedented naval mission to fight human trafficking across the Mediterranean. The mission, which will get underway next month, follows a series of deadly shipwrecks in which hundreds of people drown. It will involve warships and surveillance aircraft being deployed off the North African coast. The European Union is still waiting for a UN resolution that will allow it to destroy boats that belong to people smugglers in Libyan waters, an option Human Rights Watch has described as utter madness. A full implementation of the plan would require a resolution from the United Nations Security Council. The member states are also considering setting quotas for division of the asylum seekers among the EU nations, a plan that is causing much internal strife. We are going to break this down, but first let's take a look at the following report and discuss after.
Can the growing stream of migrants from Africa to Europe be stopped? EU foreign and defence ministers met in Brussels on Monday to set up a military operation aimed at halting illegal migrants from crossing the Mediterranean.
Today the main point will be taking the decision to establish the operation, the EU operation at sea to dismantle the criminal networks that are smuggling people in the Mediterranean.
Illegal migration jumped to the top of Europe's agenda last month when a series of disasters in the Mediterranean cost the lives of hundreds of migrants from North Africa. The crisis has shocked the European Union into pledging more money for rescues and more resources to stem the flow of migrants.
The Royal Navy is already saving lives at sea, but we need to agree action today to get after the criminal gangs and to disrupt the trafficking networks. That means gathering much more intelligence on how these networks are organised and doing more to help the countries where the migrants come from.
The EU is seeking the agreement of the United Nations Security Council and is drafting a resolution to approve the operation under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, which allows the use of force and would authorise the EU to intervene on the high seas in Libyan territorial waters and coastal areas to seize vessels. Meanwhile, the European Commission is planning legislation before the end of the year to ensure the burden of housing immigrants is shared across the bloc, according to binding quotas based on such criteria as economic health and population. However, several countries reject the plan, including the French, who prefer to aim for a European system of border controls. The opposition to quotas will leave the Commission with a political problem and will prolong the decision-making process as more people suffer from the dangerous seaborne migration.
With me in studio is the director of the Center for European Studies at the IDC Italia, Dr. Esther Lupatin. Dr. Lupatin, good morning to you. I also want to go straight first to Rome. The spokesperson for the Mediterranean International Organization for Migration, Flavio Di Giacomo, is joining us on the phone. Flavio, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I want to discuss first these attempts being put forth by the European Union. I'm assuming there's a great, opposition to it. But, the fact that there's trying to be an operation to stop these boats from coming out at the outset, do you think that will work in stopping these smugglings?
Well, it is not clear how this operation actually will be carried out. So we are a little bit concerned about the fact that it may result in migrants using even more unworthy vessels. The point is that we know that migrants, of course, they die at sea on these vessels. But at the same time, we know that migrants are a subject and target of abuses and violence and violation of human rights in Libya in the hands of the smugglers. So blocking them and destroying the boats, if the European Union will find a way to destroy these boats, will just solve half of the problem, because the other migrants will be caught, let's say, in the hands of the smugglers, will still be target of abuses and killings and rapes, etc. So it is very difficult to understand how this operation will be carried out. For the moment, we just have to wait and see. Of course, we know that these smugglers' organizations must be tackled down. This is a priority.
Right.
But the way to do it actually is not very clear, because the problem is in Libya, and we know that Libya in this moment is a country where it's very difficult to intervene because of the lack of an authority that can be a valid interlocutor for the European Union.
And do stay with us, Flavio, because with us in the studio, Dr. Lupatin, I want to ask you, Europe's terribly terrified of this influx of immigrants. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, people standing from the outside would say this is unmoral to try and push these people away. What is this big fear?
Well, I think the big fear, when you talk about immigration policy, there's a kind of a built-in conflict, especially in liberal democracy. I don't think Saudi Arabia has the same problem. But in general, on the one hand, you want to protect your national identity, because, we live in a world of nation states, which is racist idea to start with. We believe that people actually, who share a certain traditions, certain cultures, certain religions should actually live in a certain country. So we want to protect so-called the national identity, the identity of the state. On the other hand, after 1945, liberal democracies like European countries have committed themselves to protect human rights and not to behave arbitrarily, with regards to immigrants, and to grant them political and social benefits, which wasn't the case before. So there's a problem. The thing with Europe today is that there's a kind of the EU there's a kind of an outcry in the European public, because, and we see it with the rise of the right extreme in Europe. Right. What the European public is saying, that they are very disappointed of EU immigration policy. They're saying the EU immigration policy is too lenient, too soft, allows the entrance of too many immigrants, family members, and refugees. And when they look at the statistics, they're terrified. For example, in 2013, the number of refugees entering the EU was 435,000 refugees. Now, in 2020, 2014, it's 630,000. So, I mean, like, the numbers speak for themselves, and especially, you know, due to the Arab Spring, there's a real fear that the numbers, you know, will continue to increase, since there is a political instability in the Middle East and then also in Africa, and there are civil wars, and like they're not likely to stop anytime soon.
And now, and speaking of that, Flavio is still with us from Rome. But if the European Union is not going to accept, at least, let's say, you know, the quota plan of dispersing the people who've already arrived into the continent among the nations, what is going to happen to the immigrants already in Europe?
Well, first of all, I would like to underline one fact, that last year, 170,000 people arrived by sea to Italy and to Europe.
Right.
Was a big number if we compare to the previous year, which was 42,000. But if we just look at this number, it is not a problem in terms of number per se, because 170,000 people in a space, the European Union, where there are 500 million people, it is not a problem. It is a number that can be easily absorbed. The problem is in the way those people arrive, in the sense that those people die at sea. They need to be rescued, search and rescued by the Italian maritime forces, which is very difficult, of course. And the fact that there is only one single entry point to Europe, which is the Channel of Sicily, and means that in a matter of days, thousands of people may arrive in just 4 or 5 ports. So it is an operational emergency. But I wouldn't say that it's an emergency in terms of number, because we are talking about small numbers. We consider what is happening in other countries, for example, 2 million refugees, Syrian refugees in Turkey, or more than 1 million in Lebanon, which is a country with 4 million inhabitants.
Right.
So what is happening in Europe is just a small consequence of bigger, unprecedented number of crises and big movements of people happening in other areas not very far from the European Union. I think the European Union can absorb that.
And definitely, you know, that's part of the major concern. The NATO chief, Jens Stoltenberg, issued a warning yesterday linking the influx of migrants, though, to security concern. Let's have a quick listen.
There might be foreign fighters, there might be terrorists also trying to hide, to blend in among the migrants. And this just underlines the importance of that we have to respond to this turmoil. This is about criminal networks, it's about border control, it's about migration.
It's the fear of security that he's stressing, but really quickly, Dr. Lupatin, is it the fear of security, or is it also a racist Europe? I have to ask
Well,
that.
I'm sure that, you know, some of the people are going to use this channel in order to get to Europe, you know, for security reasons, you know, for terrorist attacks. But I think most of them are really like refugees. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, what happened in Egypt, you know, if you're Copts in Egypt, you know, you don't want to live in Egypt, you know. We saw that, you know, like, so it's not really safe for you. Like, the Middle East is not...
Yeah, and there are those who will argue that actually it's the other way around, that people are going over and joining terror groups in the Middle East from Europe. Sadly, all the time. We have Dr. Lupatin, though. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. When we get back, the Ethiopian protests again in Israel. They take to the streets, this time without an outburst of violence, but with the same message. First, the news. Stay with us. I-24 News on this May 19th. Ha-ha.
You got it. Thank you. I didn't want to do that.
I know. Yes, I know the date. On this May 19th, 2015, where this is the place to be. Why? Because Ami Kaufman, and yet again, his blue, I'm sorry, that tie, that bow tie has to change the color. But I'm loving the pink. You're sporting the pink, and it takes a lot of courage for a man to wear pink.
Well, yeah, I'm very confident with my.
That's
not why we're here.
Yeah, we are here with Ami, who I try to distract, to discuss the news you missed while scanning the headlines, which he does every morning for us.
Yes.
Because that's the kind of man he is. Yes.
Okay, so Prime Minister Netanyahu is in a frenzy of appointing people and firing people, and yesterday he appointed Minister Silvan Shalom to be in charge of negotiations with the Palestinians for the future of the peace process.
I'm not even being, funny, sarcastic when I'm saying what negotiations, but yeah. Okay, so Silvan Shalom is appointed the minister in charge of negotiations.
Pretty much like what Tzipi Livni was before, but the difference is that she actually believed in the two-state solution. She, wanted that, and Silvan Shalom has never said anything to that effect.
Remotely.
In fact, he has actually said that he is opposed to a Palestinian state. So this is the man who is in charge of
the negotiations. To figure out what this means, luckily for us, we're also joined on the phone by I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev. What is the essence of this, appointment, Tal?
Well, that depends who you ask. Silvan Shalom himself has been quoted in closed-door talks that he says that this means that the appointment reflects Netanyahu's will to resume negotiations. But as you mentioned, that sounds a bit far-stretched. So the more common assumption that this is mainly a political move. Netanyahu decided to keep the foreign ministry vacant, despite Silvan Shalom's himself demand and other ministers from the Likud demand who wanted to take the post. And the official explanation he gave was that he wanted to lure potential partners and expand the government. So meanwhile, as part of political bargaining, he's basically divided all of the foreign ministry's authorities between different ministers in the government who have different responsibilities. So we have Yuval Steinitz, who is the energy minister, who is in charge of the Iranian portfolio. We have Zev Elkin, who is the immigration minister, who is in charge of strategic affairs. And Silvan Shalom, who is the interior minister, will be in charge of both the so-called negotiations with the Palestinians, as well as a strategic dialogue, overseeing the strategic dialogue with the United States.
And when it comes, though, this is the type of appointment that's not going to fly, I'm assuming, with the international community if they decide to pressure towards a process.
Well, this means that they have someone to speak to that's not Netanyahu. There will be some kind of pressure, and it's going to start even this week with Federica Mogherini, the EU foreign policy chief, that's going to arrive to Israel. Definitely clarified that she intends to send a political message about renewing negotiations. So instead of these, and we will probably see other foreign ministers arriving in the upcoming weeks and months trying to pressure Netanyahu. So it means that instead of them only be able to meeting with Netanyahu himself, they will be able to meet with Silvan Shalom. They will be having someone to discuss the issues with. And if there are problems, Silvan Shalom, as we have had in the past year since talks broke down, Silvan Shalom will be handling this. But we might just note that he will still be accompanied by Netanyahu's special envoy, Isaac Molcho, who was also accompanying Tzipi Livni on the previous round of negotiations.
Tal Shalev, I-24 News diplomatic correspondent, thank you for that update regarding the appointment. Yes.
Yeah, on to our next headline. Yemen, the Saudi-led coalition has started bombing Houthi strongholds again after that 5-day ceasefire.
The 5 days are over.
The 5 days are over. Not much really managed to be done when it came to humanitarian supplies, and the UN and other people, tried to extend this, but everybody now is blaming each other. Both the Saudis and the Houthis are blaming each other.
The war in the mess continues.
The war in the mess continues.
As the Middle East is in flames. Yes.
Exactly.
Good morning to you too.
Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina has announced yesterday that he was going to announce his presidential bid on June 1st. And I want to read you this quote that why he said that he's going to run. He said, I'm running because of what you see on television. I'm running because I think the world is falling apart.
Firstly, I think that we should take pride that we are part of the reason. Because if he's running because of what he sees on television, then it's you and me, honey. It's
we're the reason that the world is falling apart. Okay, so okay. I'll take that as a compliment.
I think completely. Yeah, I think it's the bow tie.
And he also said, Jeb Bush, for example, had some trouble answering the question about if he would have gone into Iraq like his brother did, George Bush. And at first he said, I wouldn't. And then he said, yeah, well, maybe I would. No, actually, it was the opposite. He said I would, and then I wouldn't.
Then I wouldn't. Okay.
And here, Lindsey Graham also was posed the same question. He said, well, Saddam Hussein was shooting at our airplanes. He was denying UN inspectors access to sites. He was gassing his own people. He needed to go. But if I knew the intelligence was faulty, I would have reconfigured. So
reconfigured.
Reconfigured. That's a great word to use, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Note to self.
Yeah.
Things to use when in. Okay. Yes.
Sticking with the states and Obama, 9 months after the Ferguson riots, President Obama is saying that he is going to put a ban on militarized gear. And if you remember the pictures that came out of Ferguson of police in full riot gear, actually paramilitary gear with Kevlar vests and assault rifles, Obama is going to put an end to that. And he said that we've seen how militarized gear can sometimes give people a feeling like there's an occupying force as opposed to a force that's part of the community that's protecting them and serving them. So what he's going to do is he's going to stop, from wheeled armored vehicles like Humvees, manned aircraft drones.
What, to hippie trucks?
Well, just, yeah, basically that, but we're not going to see any of those.
Come in with rainbows? Okay.
We're not going to see any of those huge paramilitary forces fighting people that are riding, in T-shirts and jeans. That's, it's just not the right kind of...
It's not the right thing, and also I think, it's going to be a hard mission to try and strip them of their guns and clubs.
Yeah.
So irrespective of that, they'll be coming in with force.
Well, he's trying. He's trying. And speaking of riots, actually kind of similar riots that happened in France in 2005. Two French police officers were cleared over teenagers' deaths that sparked these riots. These are two young kids, aged 15 to 72, died in an electricity substation. And the cops were accused that they did not do enough to warn them that they were going to be electrocuted, and this sparked these riots in France.
And sadly, when it comes to racial divide across the world, Ami, I want to thank you for that.
Sure.
As we move along to our next segment, which actually, one can argue also deals with, racial divides, racism, arguably so. Hundreds of protesters gathered in Tel Aviv yesterday to demonstrate against police brutality and discrimination against the Ethiopian-Israeli community. Despite prior understandings between police and protest leaders to keep the peace, demonstrators blocked several junctions during their march through the city. The march took the protesters to Rabin Square, where earlier this month a similar demonstration turned into mayhem with heavy clashes between protesters and police. Organizers' insistence in keeping things calm, as well as stifling heat and police readiness, prevented the same images from repeating themselves. Today, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is holding a meeting to establish a ministerial committee to investigate and treat the problem plaguing Ethiopian Israelis. Very glad to be joined in studio by Elias Ingram, one of the leaders of the recent protests of the Ethiopian community. Elias, good morning to you. I want to start first with the demonstration yesterday. It turned out, I live close to Rabin Square. I did hear sirens. We did hear some stun grenades. That said, it ended fairly well, one could say. But these demonstrations...
Like any time.
And true, very true.
From our side.
Very, very true. Will these demonstrations continue? And what do you think about the committee that is going to be formed?
Well, our assumption is that, we will give the chance to announce by the government of Israel what are they going to do. We know that Bibi established the ministerial committee, but we have experience for the last 30 years with many committees and emergency committees, but nothing has happened. And we want to give a few days and to hear from him. But if nothing will happen, obviously, we will come back again to the streets of Tel Aviv.
No, and as you mentioned,
and the heart of Israel.
At the heart of Israel, what would be, the metropolitan hub. And as you mentioned, it has been 30 years of requests for the same thing. It's also the time to turn and to be joined on the phone by Likud member of Knesset, Dr. Avraham Negosa, the only actually Ethiopian Israeli in the in the new government, in the Knesset. Dr. Negosa, do you believe, because as Elias here mentioned, that the new committee that will be set up by Benjamin Netanyahu, what do you think it needs to do in order to turn this corner that after 30 years, the Israeli Ethiopians are not a homogenic part of the community and do feel like second-class citizens?
Yeah, what the new established ministerial committee should do now is taking all the demands, all the problems that we know, that there are many social problems, and dealing with these problems one by one. We have laws that should be implemented, such as the integrating of the academics into different workplaces from the public sector, the private sector, and then municipality and all. This should be implemented. that immediately, no need to delay. The second thing is that there are now the community is concentrated in many disadvantaged neighborhoods. And in those neighborhoods, there are young people who are newly married and they don't have a house, and they live with their parents with 2 rooms and 3 rooms.
That's actually most Israelis.
Immediately to create a policy that these people will have an opportunity to take mortgages and buy apartments. It is possible to give immediately to change the educational policy, such as that distributing the Ethiopian-born or Ethiopian origin children who are now 80 to 70%, 90% in the classrooms.
But yeah, that has been promised many times before. I think there's a concern about that. But Elias here has a question.
Dr. Negusa, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Elias.
I just want to ask you, you were involved also for many years trying to help the Ethiopian community in Israel. And you know about the various of committees that try to deal with the Ethiopian immigrants in Israel. What's the chance that right now it's going to happen something? What's the chance?
First of all, this is the first time, as far as my knowledge concerned, it is the first time that the Prime Minister is heading a ministerial committee. So far, there were committees, but not headed by Prime Minister. This is the first thing that I am optimistic it will happen. Secondly, the Prime Minister is, as I participated in the meeting, it lasted 3 hours 2 weeks ago, was that the Prime Minister was very committed to bring change this situation, and he promised that. The third thing is, as you know, as I have experience on this social issue advocacy activities for many years, I am there, and I want to push this situation. I know where to push it. So this is what makes me optimistic on this situation.
Dr. Negusa and Elias, I have a question actually to you both. Is there, because, you know, I'm listening to this, is there a generational gap? Because I'm sure everybody has their heart in the right place. Dr. Negusa is optimistic about this committee, but is the young generation of the Ethiopian
Dr. Negusa is always optimistic. To tell you the truth, he is my role model.
And that's my question to you. Has the younger generation, like yourself, lost faith in the number of committees, as you mentioned?
I think the young generation has no enough patience for that. They want to see immediate results because they read about the history of Ethiopian immigrants. They know that we forced the state of Israel to make the Moses operation, Solomon operation, and we suspect this government, maybe they are trying to give us good words, and then we will not have any energy to continue with the protest. That's our fear. And what Dr. Negusa is saying is he's trying to give us a hope, and I believe him, but I don't believe the government of Israel. And I think we can do in parallel. Dr. Negusa can continue with his dialogue with the government, and we will continue with the protest, and it can be very, very support. It can support.
We'll support one another, yeah. And one can only hope.
But I can assure you that the protest will continue, not with 5,000, but it will continue. And I hope, by the way, if I can add another point, is that the Jewish community who supported us for the last 30 years, I think the time has come to continue to support the Ethiopian community in Israel by talking to the government directly, but also talking to the Ethiopian leaders in Israel.
Right.
And to see what's going on the ground, because what they see is social progress only on the paper.
Right.
They don't see the reality.
Not in reality.
And I think this is the time also to ask the government of Israel what's going on with our money.
It's been 30 years. It is definitely time. Elias, thank you very much. Dr. Negusa, the same to you. When we get back with the World Marking Anti-Homophobia Day, we host Iska Smith a former Orthodox rabbi who now identifies as a woman. Do stay with us. First, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Welcome back. It is still Tuesday, May 19th, 2015. This is still the morning edition. Last I checked, I'm still Yael Lavi. Thank you for staying with us. And you should have. 2 days ago, the world marked the International Day against homophobia, transphobia, and a lot of phobias. A plea to stand with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex communities across the world. And this is the time to actually tell the story about the following woman. 25 years ago, our next guest was a man who ran a Jerusalem Educational Center for Chabad, a religious group that helps bring unaffiliated Jews closer to their faith. These days, Iska Smith is doing a different sort of outreach. As a transgender activist and educator who preaches a message of truth and tolerance, the 63-year-old Smith lives an active life in Jerusalem, giving lectures on Judaism, teaching part-time at a local seminary, and discussing her book, 40 Years in the Wilderness, My Journey to Authentic Living. I am very, very honored and happy to be joined in studio by Iska Sarah Smith. Thank you for being here. By the way, I have to say you look great for your age. I cannot believe I just said that, but many people say the same to me. So first of all, thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna hold this up, to begin our item, and this is your book, 40 Years in the Wilderness, My Journey to Authentic Living. And it's this journey that I want to talk about. I think being transgender has been in the news because of Bruce Jenner umpteen times over the course of the last 2 months. But I think your story may put things into perspective even more so. It wasn't the Kardashians you were living with. You were actually a rabbi in many ways, right? You were a rabbi.
I never received official ordination, but in terms of educating and directing programming, I was acting in the role of a rabbi.
In the role of a rabbi. How many years did you live, or as you said to me off camera, lying to yourself as a man?
From actually when I was born, became aware at 5 already that something is not right. Very not right, but in 1956, 1957, I didn't have the language that 5-year-olds today have. So part of my problem and struggle was I thought I was the only person on the planet suffering from this, where my body was not expressing who I believed I really am. And then at 20, so from 5 to 20, I tried so hard to live like a boy because the world kept telling me, my mother told me I'm a boy. She wouldn't lie, but deep inside I knew that was not true. I didn't know what else to do though. And then at 20, I made my first trip to Israel. I actually wanted to work on a kibbutz. Because I thought that's a place where I'm not supposed to think about myself. So as everyone else who visits Israel, I landed up at the Western Wall, and there I am faced with this decision because there's the mechitzah, the divider.
Men or women.
Right, where do I go? If I go where I belong, everyone will stare at me and I'll cause all kinds of problems. And if I go where the world says I should, in a place that's so holy to the Jewish people, I'll be lying. But I had to touch those stones. So I went into the men's section, and that began the next 20-year journey of becoming more observant, more spiritually tuned into my soul, which really complicated the whole disconnect between body and soul.
Exactly.
And then at 40, it all fell out from under me.
And I want to talk about that moment where it all fell out, because as you said, that disconnect between who you feel you are, what the world tells you you are, but within the world of religion, be it Jewish or Christianity, that must be the hardest thing to do.
Well, it was really difficult because spiritually I was so drawn to the Torah and the teachings of the Torah and the teachings especially of Chassidut, of the spiritual teachings, being in relationship with God. And yet the mitzvot in traditional Judaism really make a lot of distinctions, not only between men and women, between day and night, between Shabbat and the week. So there I am in a more of a gray area trying to fit into a black and white world. And it was so difficult. Plus I didn't feel I could talk to anyone about it. Again, because I thought I was the only person. And I remember when I was living in the Jewish quarter in the old city, in the Rova, so every Friday night when I would go to the kotel, part of the prayer we say on Shabbat is V'taheh libeinu l'avdecha be'emet. And here I am talking to God at the kotel on the men's side, purify our hearts so we can be with you in truth. And it was terrible. It was terrible because I so wanted to be be'emet. I really meant that tefillah, but yet I was saying it from a place that was not authentic. But I didn't know what else to do. I simply didn't know what else to do.
No, it's incredibly, incredibly courageous, and you make the decision, and at 40 you said everything fell apart, and you started the process.
Yeah.
Why did it fall apart?
Well, externally, Israel was attacked by Iraq. It was the Gulf War crisis. And I felt, as Israel was being attacked on the outside, I was being attacked on the inside. It all came. I couldn't do it anymore. I could not sustain the deception. I kept making for 20 years this agreement with God that I made. I made a contract with God, and I had God sign the contract. God, I will be observant. And I was so desperate, I really believed it for a while. I'll be observant to the upteenth, where I'll be Haredi, I'll be Chabad, I'll have a growing family, I'll direct the Chabad house for English-speaking programming. But please, either when I wake up tomorrow morning, let me feel like I'm a man and not a woman, or let me wake up and have the body of a woman and not of a man. And after 20 years, as Israel was under attack, I felt I was under attack internally. I couldn't do it anymore. And I said, you know, God, I kept my end of the deal. I really did. And it led to a divorce, breaking up a beautiful family, leaving Jerusalem, leaving Torah. I felt there was no place for me. I so wanted a place. But I couldn't straddle on the mechitza. Either it was this or that. And
the divorce, the losing the family, are you in touch with them since? Have they accepted you?
Well, you know, out of respect to my family's privacy, I don't discuss them.
Okay, no, completely understood.
Thank you.
But not just the family. I'm asking because you've made a very, very courageous decision. You live in Jerusalem. You know, it's a very, you know, it's a city where people have very strong opinions about everything. Are you accepted? Do you feel that you're accepted?
You know, that's an interesting word. I never really sought acceptance.
Amen. No, okay.
Well, no, I shouldn't say that. For the first 40 years of my life, I was desperate for acceptance. Once I made the decision to transition is when I finally felt accepted by God. And I don't mean to sound simplistic, or I don't mean to sound romantic about it, but seriously, I was unable to proceed on this venture, on this transition journey, without knowing God wanted this of me. Actually, I felt it was more of a return to Judaism in a real way than it was more of that type of a journey. It was a journey of healing and spirituality than it was of a gender transition. The gender transition was the prat, was the particular, what we call the garment, to use the words of Hasidut. But once I realized Hashem was directing me, God was directing me, I was not looking for acceptance. What I do look for, though, is much more than acceptance. I want to be loved. I want to be embraced. I want to be respected.
Now, I'm asking this because Israel has just gone through elections. The government elected, the right-wing government also has factions in it that are very, very religious to the so-called old core Orthodox. And you're hoping for, and I think many of us hope for, that actually there'll be more embracing of everybody. Do you think that that stands a danger now?
No, I think actually, a lot of what I see in Israel today is reactive behavior. And in Jewish history, through thousands and thousands of years of Jewish history, whenever we reach a new point, a very important fork in the road, and there are new novel ideas and new novel, when there's a chidush, when there's something new, there's always a reaction by the status quo against it. So that's how you know that you're really making your mark, so to speak. Not that we should do things in the name of change, but when change is necessary. I'll quote one of my favorite rabbis, Rabbi Sachs, who is the prior chief rabbi of Great Britain. He said, we need to be at any given time, we need to be both guardians of the past, we need to honor our past, but yet we need to be trustees for our children's futures. So we need to like look into the future and have a vision.
Yeah.
And part of that vision requires change.
Amen.
So
on so many levels, Iska, you're locked in the studio with us. The book is 40 Years in the Wilderness. It's a remarkable story. It's a remarkable life. I'm very honored to have you with us. Now to something, as they say, as Monty Python says, entirely different? Completely different, yeah. That would be Ami Kaufman with the viral spiral that is the web review. Yes, please.
Well, we're going to start with Twitter. This is an amazing item. President Obama just got his own Twitter account.
Finally!
Yeah, he said that after 6 years, they finally gave him an account, as we can see in this picture here.
Yeah, he's a bit behind.
6 years, they're finally giving me my own account. Now, he announced this yesterday, evening Israel time.
Right.
And he has now this morning over 1.5 million followers.
That's kind of like your Twitter account, isn't it, Ami?
Just about. Just a little bit more.
But, wow. And many people were congratulating him,
right? He had some really nice reactions. The first one that we have, I think, is from Vice President Biden.
Let's take a look.
We have his tweet. He said, "Welcome to Twitter. See you around the neighborhood." Hey, POTUS. But my favorite is a little conversation that he had with former President Bill Clinton. Let's see what Bill Clinton says. Clinton says, "Welcome to Twitter, POTUS. One question. Does that username stay with the office?" He says, asking for a friend. And President Obama answers him, "Good question, Clinton. The handle comes with the house. Know anyone interested in FLOTUS?"
FLOTUS. Nice. First Lady of the United States. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe we'll find out some things about Bill Clinton himself. Yes, that one was for you. And
that was really good. Moving on. Jay-Z there's a report that he bailed protesters during the riots across the states that were being arrested. He posted bail for a lot of people. This was a writer, Dream Hampton, posted some tweets on Twitter that she later erased because she didn't want to embarrass Jay-Z, but everybody saw it already and made screenshots that he wrote checks of tens of thousands of dollars to post bail for people that were
somebody's stepping into the racial divide to try and save the situation in one way, shape, or another in the United States.
Totally.
Yeah.
This little item shows that there is no future for humanity. We are all going to die.
Okay.
This one is about...
Welcome to our studio and good morning. This is the show of the death, destruction, and no future.
There's a challenge going on social media called the Fire Challenge, where kids put lighter fluid on themselves. These are kids like 9, 10, 11 years old. And they video themselves lighting themselves up in with
for the love of God.
And then they have the challenge is they have to jump into a pool or a bathtub and douse themselves out. So here you can see this picture in the Daily Mail. This is a guy who's lighting himself up. Now there are thousands and thousands of kids that are doing this all over, and posting it on YouTube, on Facebook, and Facebook is trying to get their videos down, not very successfully, and it's still going like, I don't want to see like wildfire. That would be just mean. Yeah. But yeah.
No, that was the right thing to use, and humankind, mankind.
It's a lost cause.
Lost cause. Yeah, I think we should throw in the towel.
This is another sad one. Harry Shearer from The Simpsons. He was the voice of Ned Flanders and Mr. Burns and some other very great characters. He is going to leave. He might have been fired, or he might be quitting. I think it looks like he's been fired.
Not only that, Harry Shearer I think also of was he in Best in Show?
No, he was in Spinal Tap.
Spinal Tap, exactly.
He co-produced and he was in it. He's a really great actor.
Yeah.
And we have a little clip here of some of the voices that he did on The Simpsons for about 26 years that he's been doing this.
This is for Flanders and actually for Harry Shearer. Let's have a listen.
Yeah. Mr. Burns. Yes. What is your occupation?
Mogul.
Tell me, if you will, how you feel about your employee, Homer Simpson.
Who?
Homer Simpson. I believe that you're a person who sort of believes in revenge, don't you?
Yes. Hence the hounds.
Of course. Mr. Smithers.
Yes. Call me.
Hi there, Mr. Flanders.
Hello. How are you?
Principal of Springfield Elementary, Seymour Skinner.
Thank you very much. Let's hold that down, please. Let's hold that down. Let's keep this in order. And will you please sit down, sir?
No. So who's going to be Mr. Burns?
They say they're going to find a replacement that'll, try to be the best replacement that they can find. But
no, that's devastating.
After 26 years, I mean, can you believe how long that show is going on already?
26 years, yeah. As successful as we are, Ami.
I know. We've been here for about 30
years. Yeah, we've been here for about, I think 50. Yes, and?
This is, it sounds like the beginning of a joke. Two Jews walk into a Walmart in Arkansas. no, this happened.
It can't be a joke. That would never happen.
They walked into in Walmart.
I've been
and they
to
found
Arkansas.
this guy.
You don't want to go to Arkansas. Oh, yeah, I said that on the air. And
they found this guy in the Walmart who had this tattoo on his arm. Let's see the picture of this tattoo if we can. As you can see, it says, we know what it says. It says matzah. But they asked him, well, hey, do you know what your tattoo says? He says, yeah, sure. It says strength in Hebrew.
Oh, God.
And
oh, God.
And so this guy who took the picture of it, his name is Sruli Shocha. He put it up on Facebook, and again, it went viral. He said he didn't have the heart to tell the guy what it said. Now, I think this is really the issue, and what would people have done if they were in the same situation? For example, if I was in the same situation, I would have told him
I gotta tell you, I'm sporting a tattoo, and I will not tell you where, but it is an Indian. And, you know, I think my first time in India was after I got that tattoo, and I did walk around, you know, lifting my shirt, asking people if this says what I wanted it to say, or if it says 2 chicken tikkas and a Diet Coke. So
you got the right one, though.
Luckily for me, I got the right one.
Well, apparently Shochet said that he's sorry he didn't get the name of the person, and that he's going to, he hoped this post reaches him, he's going to go for a GoFundMe campaign for laser tattoo removal for this guy.
Amen. All the time we have. When we get back, more sad stories. This time about pollution in Haifa. Stay with us. It's going to be a fabulous morning. But first, the news. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I-24 News Morning Edition on this May 19th, 2015. It's the perfect time to say hello and good morning to the Economy Magazine host and my one and personally favorite man on the planet. I say this to everybody, Benjamin Chong Alvarez. Yeah, what am I heading to? I know. Where am I going with this? It's Tuesday.
Started very good.
It started good and then just went downhill. Mirav helped me out here. Mirav Severe, we're not
as long as you say I'm your favorite female on the Facebook planet,
then we're fine.
And you don't tell that to everyone.
No. It's just Mirav and you, Benjamin. Yes, Economy Magazine. What do you have for us?
Greece. More Greece. So
I know, I'm happy this is on the table because I just came back from Greece.
Yes,
go ahead.
Indeed.
Yes.
So when you were in Greece, were you in public transportation at all?
Yes.
So were you at all? Did you see any of these commercials going on regarding the war debt that Germany has to Greece?
Not only did I got to tell you. First of all, I took the tube. Basically, I took the subway, the Greek subway. I got to tell you, phenomenally clean. That was the one thing I noticed. No, unbelievably clean. It's unbelievable. And yes, they have a thing with the Germans. Yes.
Okay. Well, I think we actually have a report on this. Let's see the report first.
Let's take a look.
A film is repeatedly being broadcast on the screens of the Athens metro. These images are made by the Greek government to illustrate the damage caused by Germany to Greece during the Second World War.
There are campaigns in the metro for all sorts of things. So why not a campaign that is an issue that is topical regardless of whatever is good or bad?
When I saw this video, I was glad because I think everyone needs to know what happened then. And it had to be broadcast somehow, and until now, it has never been.
For the past few months, the new left-led government has been pushing for 279 billion euros to be paid in reparations by Germany for damage they caused in the war. This amount would cover over 85% of Greek debt today. From 1941 to 1944, the Nazis occupied Greece, which became among the most damaged European states. The Germans plundered the country's gold reserves and devastated villages. 600,000 Greeks were killed. Since then, Germany has still not fulfilled all of its declared reparative duties. Only 115 million Deutschmarks, the equivalent of 58 million euro, were paid in 1960. It was a provisional amount for the Greek government, and for them, the full sum is still forthcoming.
Our generation should continue the battle. Our children should not let the red thread of history be cut. Because the people shed their blood for the country and our memory remains alive and active.
Meanwhile, Athens is reeling from the 7 billion euros in bailout loans it has to repay before the summer, with Greece's exit from the euro at stake. And as of March, a survey showed that at least 52% of Germans are okay with the Greek exit.
Benjamin, you know, the fact of the matter is, and I'm wondering out loud with you, the Greeks, you know, if we simplify this, and I'm simplifying it as somebody who doesn't understand anything about economy, the Greeks owe a whole lot of money to the Germans right now. Okay.
Not just to the Germans, but yes, the Germans are essentially the first in line, so to speak. Yes.
For the person standing from the outside, you would say, is this some sort of a scheme to try and actually...
Clearly, it's not coincidental.
Bingo.
And especially considering that, I mean, essentially, the Greeks just came out this month with the claim of 279 billion euros. Now, if you realize that, they originally borrowed about 240 billion euros, there's so many zeros here that no one seems to really keep track of the exact number.
Would cover that with a little change. Yeah.
Yeah, but the debt at this point is about 315 billion euros, so it doesn't entirely cover it, but it's a nice amount of money when you owe so much money. Of course, well, let's just look at this claim. Okay, there is some meat to this claim. It's not entirely out of nowhere.
Okay, what is it?
It's not entirely out of nowhere. Let's go back to, you have essentially the war reparations, and then there's also a loan. Now, the loan, no one can say is just a claim that has absolutely nothing to it. Clearly, the Nazi regime, during its occupation of Greece for 3.5 years, did take a loan, forced the Greek bank to give it a loan of about 476 million Deutsche Marks, which the Bundestag in 2012, according to reports, said came to about $8.2 billion, and Greek says no, it's about 11 billion euros. Okay, this is still very far from 279 billion euros, right? Now, I mean, if you look at history, and we're not really going to go into history here, what happened with Germany after the war? At a certain point, you had the Cold War. Germany needed to be sort of set up as a bulwark against the Soviet Union. There's this haircut of debt by the U.S. Then there was the Marshall Plan, the investment in Western European infrastructure. And eventually, Germany coughed up towards the end of the 50s, 115 million Deutsche Marks to the Greek government. And that was it. That was the end of the story, with the idea being that once Germany reunites, then we'll revisit this, knowing that it wasn't going to happen anytime soon. And when Germany actually did reunite, it was sort of,
it was going to shoot under
the carpet somewhere. It's not entirely a false claim here, but what the exact amount should be is a different story.
You were looking at this campaign in Greece, clearly trying to ignite the people, to join behind, so it becomes more of an upbeat battle. But isn't it deflecting attention from the fact that they are really disappointed in Tsipras? Because if this is the attempt to solve the debt to Germany,
they put Tsipras in power. So frankly, Tsipras and Syriza keep on coming out with the fact that, well, hey, listen, we're not going to go back on our campaign promises. Our people come first. The creditors say, no, you owe us money. You need to enact those changes that we require, which means if there's austerity cuts that need to be made, then that's what it is. Reforms, you have to put in the reforms. Otherwise, there's no more money coming to you. That's it. We cut you off. So, I think what's happening here is, well, as opposed to the people, as you sort of seem to imply, going against Syriza, he's saying, no, we're not the culprits. They're the culprits. They're the ones who are keeping the money away from us. They're the ones who really owe us money from the war. Remember the war? It's not so long ago. It's only 70 years ago. That's where you should be, focusing your anger. So there is a political game going on here.
There is on everything.
But Germany does owe money. Of course, when you go to the whole reparations issue, it's not so simple. It's not so pashut, as we say in Hebrew. There's a lot of reparations that technically are owed, not just by Germany. If you look at Second World War reparations, but you could go back to, African Americans.
True.
Do they
owe? No, very true. I'm wondering, we all know, but one has to wonder if this is going to fly.
At what point does it finish?
Exactly.
Well, the Germans have said so much. I mean, the Deputy Chancellor Sigmar Gabriel just said, there's zero chance.
Yeah, this
is very clear.
Yeah, it's like 9 in German. I'm sure that was 9. Finally, really quickly, are we looking at a Grexit?
Are we looking at a Grexit? Listen, this is where it seems to be going.
Okay.
I mean, Tsipras seems to be a very principled man. Syriza obviously has a strong ideology. They believe in what they believe in. They're not like our politicians who sort of sway back and forth between left and right. They seem to really believe in what they believe in. Okay, and so you have that, and then you have the taxpayers in Europe, and you have Germany wants to keep on to his money.
And there goes the domino that is the EU. But now we're theorizing and not making things up. Benjamin, stay in place. You're locked in studio as we move along. Moving on to the next topic, the Israeli Health Ministry created an uproar in recent weeks after releasing a report stating that there was a link between the air pollution in the Haifa Bay and cancer cases. Linoy Susan, a 7-year-old girl from Haifa, is suing the Health and Environmental Protection Ministries for negligence and physical damage. Susan was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago and claims in the suit filed by her parents on her behalf that her illness is related to the high levels of air pollution in the area near where she lives. Joining me in studio is Mirav Savir, I-24 News correspondent, who made a report on that, who reported on that story and met the child and the family. Mirav, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Before we break it down, let's take a look at your report and discuss it later.
Linoy Susan's family discovered she has leukemia 2 years ago.
She came home from kindergarten and was always tired. We decided to go do regular tests. She probably has an iron deficiency or something. And then we found out she has leukemia.
They live in Haifa, an area in Israel known for its high air pollution because of a large number of factories, and they attribute Linoy's disease to the air.
We live here. We're born here. We can smell the factories.
After different consultations, they decided to take the Israeli government to court over Linoy's leukemia.
The director of the hospital says in the last 10 years there's an increase of 30%. And we see every day there's a new kid, a new person who is sick. And because of this, we decided with our lawyer to move forward with it and to sue. We know it will be hard, very hard.
Although air pollution was identified as a cause of cancer in adults, Miriam Ben Aroush, the director of pediatric hematology and oncology at Rambam Hospital, says pollution as a cause of cancer in children specifically has not been definitively proven yet.
Still, for kids, there is no proof that air pollution causes cancer. There are a lot of research projects that are trying first to answer the question of why kids have cancers when it's not hereditary. Cancer in adults is a cancer that grows slowly, and the exposure to air pollution is over time that causes cancer in the lungs or the bladder. In kids, it's a swift illness, and at the moment the cell divides, we can identify it very quickly, and there is no exposure over time to the environment that can cause cancer.
In the last month, the Israeli government released statistics about the cancer rate in Haifa and cancer in kids, then quickly retracted its statement. Some, like Liora Amitai, the head of the organization Citizens for the Environment, says the government is trying to hide information from citizens.
The government until now kept quiet and tried to silence these statistics. The statistics have been known to the government for decades. You need to understand that the first and most important to blame for the contamination and the way it is handled is the State of Israel. The biggest contaminators in the area since the beginning of the State of Israel and until today belong to the state.
The area affected is known as the Krayot. It extends from the Haifa Bay to Acre and is home to several dozen factories which pump their chemicals into the air and into the water. Between 1998 and 2007, cancer rate in the area was 16% higher than the rest of Israel. Kiryat Chaim is one of the most affected neighborhoods. Liora lived here until she was 5.
This is where I grew up, like I told you. My mom had cancer twice. My grandmother died from cancer. My dad also had cancer.
Less than 50 meters from the building is a giant container, one of several in the neighborhood. Local residents recently took a stand and at the beginning of the month held a protest against pollution in the city. Haifa City Hall said they were on the people's side, and they are also looking for answers from the government, which Liora says is a new attitude from the municipality.
The mayor is changing his stance slowly. Until today, he was not with the people. He didn't think like us.
As of right now, the health ministry has not responded to our questions. It seems no one, not the municipality nor the government, has any answers.
We're also joined on the phone by Elad Hochman, Government Relations Coordinator at the environmentalist group, the Green Course. Elad, good morning to you. Do stay with us.
Good morning.
Good morning. I want to speak to Mirav Savir, who reported this story. Mirav, when it comes to the specific case of the 7-year-old girl, I'm assuming that it'll come, it'll rise and fall on the fact that nobody can really prove that cancer in children is something that's caused by air pollution.
I'm no medical expert, so all I know is from what I've researched online and what I've been told by these experts, and it seems as if there's a very, very fine line between suspected and proven. And it's been proven in adults and children, it's still under that term suspected cause because of the benzene. Especially in leukemia, benzene causes leukemia. But again, it's a question, does it come from air pollution? Does it come from gasoline in cars? So they're still looking to prove this, and as Professor Ben Aroush told us, they're continuing with all these different projects in order to see what can cause these. Everything anything, including what the parent's occupation is, can be a factor in this.
Which, you know, in the court of law, that'll be the sticking point. At the end of the day, though, we have to remember, as the report says, it's a 7-year-old girl with cancer, and there's a 16% rise. Was it 16?
It was 16% higher than the rest of the country.
Higher than the rest of the country of the cancer cases in Haifa. And I want to ask you, Mr. Hochman, Elad Hochman, when it comes to the government of Israel, because this is, you know, there's been several reports about Haifa, the air pollution. We haven't seen a full-blown, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, class action lawsuit. But is the government aware? Is something being done?
So as far as we know, not only that nothing is being done, we see that the Ministry of Environmental Protection, that's supposed to monitor those dangerous substances, that those factories are letting into the air. Not only that they're not monitoring, in 2013 they didn't monitor any of those substances going into the air. Those pollution that we, in the past 3 or 4 years, that we know that are in our air causing cancer for adults, for sure, for children, I'm sure of it as well. Nothing is being monitored. And then the Ministry of Health will come and will say that there is no proven connection between air pollution into in cancer in children or in adults. So it's something that we cannot just rest. The population of Haifa cannot rest aside and to be sure that our government is working.
No.
We know now that the government is trying to prove to let the industry, the oil refineries, as well as the containers that you mentioned, to get bigger 3 times of what they are today, with the statistics of 16% more cancer disease in Haifa. I think
it's fairly clear. No. It's as was mentioned ago, it's fairly clear, Mr. Hochman. I want to thank you for being with us this morning. Mirav Savir, very important story. I hope we'll be following it through if there will be any kind of reaction, if anything will be done by the government of Israel. All the time we had this morning. I-24 News Morning Edition. Don't forget to check us out tomorrow morning. The place to be to start your day. Of course, also all on all social networks. And of course, stay with I-24 News. Now, the news.